Welcome to Hope and Help, the podcast that encourages listeners to see that no matter what life throws at you, there's always hope. You just need to know where to look. If you find value in these conversations, don't forget to follow and subscribe on YouTube or your favourite podcast platform, so you never miss an episode. If you're inspired by what you hear, we'd appreciate you leaving a review. It helps others discover the podcast, but also spreads the hope even further.
Anything I could steal, I would take. If it wasn't nailed down, even if it was, I'd still take it.
People are going to take drugs anywhere. We're trying to educate them.
Within 3 days, I was on a life support machine. I'd died.
It's unbelievable to think that someone's actually going to give you a chance for a new life.
I wouldn't want to go back to jail, but jail saved my life quite a few times.
Welcome along.
You all right?
Yep. Shawn, very, very welcome, man. So I'll start. We'll go from where you're from. Shawn, you tell us where you're from and then we'll roll from there.
So I'm from Pate Lane, County Durham.
Yeah.
On the north east coast.
And you were saying before that you grew up there.
I did.
And life, early life for you and stuff like that. What was it like?
Yeah, I had a good childhood. Got 2 sisters and a brother. I'm probably the black sheep of the family, you know what I mean? But they all got jobs. They all turned, got decent jobs and stuff like that. But I didn't have a bad childhood up until I was 13, 14, and then my mum and my dad divorced. I went and live with my dad. Mm-hmm. So my dad was an alcoholic. Yeah. Pretty much allowed to do whatever I wanted to do, which I did.
Yeah. And still around the east coast of Durham and stuff though?
Yeah.
That's where you were at, yeah? So and that resonates with me a little bit. I kind of had that same experience, and I was left with my mother, and that was a kind of, she did try, but I was allowed to do whatever I wanted. Yeah. And so things started going really wrong early on, I would say. Yeah. So life's all right. You're moving through your childhood and stuff. School, did you go to school or anything?
I went to school occasionally.
Yeah.
So when I did go there, I just messed about, constantly bunking off from school. Mm-hmm. Got to the stage where I was sent down to a boarding school down in Doncaster, which I absolutely hated.
Yeah.
I did, my first, I think I was there a month, and then went home, my first visit home, back up to Pate Lee. Stayed there for a week and I didn't go back. I just went on a little mini crime wave. Mm-hmm. I did eventually get arrested a week or 2 later. The headmaster drove all the way up from Doncaster to pick us up. And I always remember going to this school because it was down in Doncaster, and it was all like public school boys and stuff like that. And I always remember the headmaster was actually from Pate Lee. And he was like, I hope you're going to show a good example for the North East. And I was like, well, I was like 13, 14 at the time. Mm-hmm. And then did a bunk from there, went on a little mini crime wave and ended up getting arrested. And the headmaster drove all the way up from Doncaster to pick us up from the police station, and, got us outside the police station to take us to the car. And I was like, I was gone, see you later. Yeah. He point blank refused to have us back at this school,
Well, you were setting a good example for people in the North East.
We
all good runners.
Yeah.
It's one of them. So, you mentioned your dad with the addiction problems and stuff.
Yeah.
What were the difficulties for you? It must have been incredibly difficult in that situation.
Well, and I did take something out of that, and I will go into a little bit about my addiction in a bit. My dad being an alcoholic totally put me off alcohol.
Yeah.
I was never ever a drinker because of that. Watching what my dad went through, but I was pretty much allowed to do what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. My dad would buy his drugs. He took his drugs into jail when I did prison sentences. Yeah. I used to have sessions with my dad. He pretty much wasn't my dad. He was more like a friend, Mm-hmm. But then and I will go into it a little bit more later on, and then my dad got into recovery, by this time out, I was on all sorts of stuff, heroin, crack, taking dodgy tablets, and then like I said, my dad used to buy his drugs, take his drugs into jail and stuff, and then my dad got got into recovery himself, and all that stopped. And I was like, you selfish bastard. You know, there's all the stuff that's, you know, him buying his drugs and whatnot, all that stopped, you know, and, you know.
So when you mention heroin and stuff, I mean, you mentioned before when we were talking, that, so that the kind of entry into was cannabis and stuff, and then you mentioned the famous Blue Monkey and nights out, and obviously raves and no doubt ecstasy and stuff like that. When was the first time that you kind of touched upon heroin, and you know, what's the reasons for taking it? Because for me, you know, being involved in crime early on, I was always told to stay away from heroin and stay away from heroin users and stuff, and that was my kind of training into the criminal world, if you like. So I always avoided that. I have tried heroin a couple of times, you know, in the past, but luckily it wasn't for me. So your first kind of experience with it, what did that look like?
You know, and I always swore down myself that I would never ever touch it. You know, obviously I'd heard of heroin and stuff, you know, but I didn't know anyone who was on it. But when I was about 18, 19, I ended up getting a prison sentence and going to home house, and watching all the lads from Middlesbrough, Stockton coming in, back in them, you know, going back 30, 35 years ago now. You know, back in them days, there was no methadone, you know, you were looking to get a paracetamol. And I got padded up with this lad who was doing his detox off, or doing his rattle off heroin, you know, and it totally put us off, and I swore down, I would, you know, watching what he went through, and I swore down I would never ever touch heroin. I meant it at the time. Finished my prison sentence, got out, pretty much all my friends were taking on it, you know, and you know, I'm one of these, I've got an addictive personality. You know, I will try anything once, you know. Even now, you know, my addiction comes out one way or another, you know what I mean, there's always something. So it didn't take as much to get back, you know, to try heroin. Like I said, I got out of jail, pretty much all my friends were using it, and I swore down I would never touch it, but I'd say within a week I was smoking it. It was like a comfort blanket around us, you know. Heroin back in them days, you know, did exactly what heroin was supposed to do.
Today's episode is sponsored by Time for Teeth, providing dental care services in secure settings in the UK, working as one and being proud of what we do. Never give up.
So the whole comfort blanket thing, obviously, that touches back on the difficulties that you had. Your mum and dad splitting up, the life you were living, you know, your dad with his addiction issues and stuff like that. And you hear that often, don't you? It's like a spiritual painkiller and a physical painkiller.
It is, but it's also, you know, like I said, all my friends were taking it all, and I didn't have none of this, like, serious childhood trauma and stuff like that, you know. None of this, you know, it was more peer pressure for me. You know, all my friends were taking it, you know. And it's that, like I said, peer pressure, you know, you sat in the house, all your friends are doing it, you know, you don't want to be left out, stuff like that. And
you mentioned before, obviously smoking it on the foil and stuff, and chasing it, and then another kind of bridge you crossed, you would never go and inject. You made that, you know, I've made that statement before as well. I definitely wouldn't do that, and I ended up doing it, so that kind of progressed onto injecting.
And I always remember, you know, so as you said, I did say, you know, I would never ever inject again. I meant it. I was great at making promises to myself and other people and not keeping them. But I always remember the first time I injected and why I did it. It was so I was with a good friend of mine. You know, there was a drought of, you know, there wasn't much heroin kicking about around Peterlee, and we managed to get a tenner bag between us, a tenner bag of heroin. And my mate, you know, pretty much said, "Shall we inject it?" You know, didn't think twice about it. Didn't have a clue. I didn't know how to cook up or anything like that. He did that for us. You know, he injected us first time, and you know, when I thought smoking heroin was amazing, you know, injecting heroin, you know, it's just instant like that. You know, and I from that didn't look back.
So then you find yourself with a raging habit.
Well, you know, it goes from smoking heroin once or twice a week, you know, you're 6, you know, and then you're moving on to injecting. You you know, and then you're 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the line, you're not just doing it for the fun of it anymore. You're doing it because you need to do it. If you're not doing it, then you're bad.
And funding that then, so you must have been getting through quite a few quid to fund it.
Well, you know, on top of the heroin, you know, I'm taking other stuff on top of that, you know, just, you know, it wasn't just heroin, I was smoking crack. That was, you know, that came along later on, you know, I loved tablets, you know.
So when you say tablets like Valium and...
Valium, or, you know, any downers, Valium, Zopiclone, anything like that. You know, also had cannabis every day. I loved the grain, you know, and you know, all the way from my addiction, I always made sure I had something to smoke every day. Crime levels went out the window, you know, absolutely out the window. You know, I know when I first started off, I was like, as a young kid, stealing cars and stuff like that. But nothing was safe. Anything I could steal, I would take. If it wasn't nailed down, even if it was, I'd still take it. I'd find a way to take it. But I was stealing off, you know, off family. I was burgling. I was robbing. Shoplifting. You know.
I mean, when I first got into this kind of work, obviously I'd never touched heroin, but I took a lot of other drugs and stuff. And you mentioned Free the Way before, and I was down with Free the Way to do voluntary. And I'll never forget this lady I was talking to, and she said, "Do you know what it's like? I can't let my son in the house because he's robbed everything from us." And she said he sleeps in the graveyard outside the back garden underneath some tarpaulin, and I've got to watch him in the window underneath that tarpaulin, but I can't let him in because he'll steal everything. And it's always stuck with us, that.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, I thought, what a tragedy. Do you know what I mean? The impact that it has on families.
My mum was exactly the same, you know. You know, my mum would see me walking along the street, just whereas my dad was an alcoholic, you know, my mum, you know, she had like occasional drink and stuff like that, you know, but she hated drugs, you know, wouldn't have them in the house. She would see us walking along the street, she would lock the door and hide behind the couch, you know. She's admitted that since, you know. She's also, you know, she's told us since I got clean, whenever she bought us anything for Christmas, like clothes and stuff like that, it would always be the cheapest of clothes. So she knew the next day I was cashing them all in, you know, so...
Well, Alan, we mentioned as well before, the guy at Middlesbrough, really great guy. He told us about his wedding day. So he met his girlfriend, they were both heroin addicts. They both pawned the rings within 20 minutes of getting married. Do you know what I mean? So I always say you've got to feed that demon, haven't you, that devil, and it's just it's thirsty, and it's you can never fill it.
We talk about it quite regularly, you know. Just me addiction, you know. It's a 24/7 job, you know. It's a full-time job, you know. Being a heroin addict, you know, it really is. You know, and I always remember my sister's boyfriend telling me, "Dad, I was lazy." You know, he's obviously never been a heroin addict, you know what I mean? So I was anything but lazy, you know.
Well, some of the work I do in the prisons, I would say to people, look, it's like asset-based work. So you're looking to see what skills people might have, you know, what skills they might like, where they think they go in life, you know, and trying to prevent them going back to jail. And I was talking to a guy, and he'd been a heroin addict for 15 years. And he said, "I've got no skills." I said, "You have. They are there. You've just got to sit and think about them. You know, you've got people skills, you know, getting up and scoring every day. You know, you've got to be driven, haven't you? I know the addiction driving you sometimes, but you've got to know." And I said, you've also got great people skills, because you know who you don't have to pay back. You know who you do. You've got to be a good judge of character. And the ingenious ways that you'll find to steal, to pay. You know, I bet there's a box set on that if you started talking about that. The stuff you've done to pay for it. Is that's a whole different story, isn't it? So the skills are there, aren't they? So that goes on then, and obviously that involves prison sentences, multiple prison sentences. So
multiple prison sentences. You know, also in a serious relationship at this time and all. You know, a girl I was in a relationship, I had, you know, ended up having 3 boys. You know, so I had three kids at this time and all. You know, she wasn't a drug. I'm saying she wasn't a drug user. You know, she smoked a bit of cannabis. You know what I mean? But she didn't do heroin or anything, heavier than that. You know, like I said, I had 3 kids and all. As much as I loved my kids, didn't have the time of day for them. Drugs were the most important thing in my life. But just constantly in and out of jail. You know,
Well, I bumped into, I was out on Saturday, it was my business partner's and birthday. So we're all out and I bumped into a girl who I was going out with for 4 years. And I said, I really loved you. And she said, but you loved you more, didn't you? And you love crime more.
Yeah.
You know, and that hit us as well. I thought, you know, you're absolutely right. Because that's what I put first. I put crime before her, and just the same as addiction, you know, before everyone else as well.
You know, and it's so true, you know, because I absolutely loved drugs, you know, at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, but the path it took us down, you know, and I showed you a picture of exactly what heroin
I wish
did
the
to me.
camera could see it now, actually.
You know,
it was shocking.
You know, and that's exactly what drugs did to me. So yeah, I did. I love drugs, you know.
Well, I think I would never advocate taking them, but I've had, and I would state this on here, I've had some wonderful times on drugs. I would never advocate anyone else taking them. Some mystical, spiritual times. I've had great times at festivals.
Yeah.
But I think speaking with you and hearing some of your story and seeing, you know, the photograph of when you know, just coming out of active addiction, addiction ends the same way. So our stories, there's some similarities, but what happens is the darkness of addiction is the same, isn't it? I've never ever met a happy addict. I've never ever met anyone say, when I was addicted to heroin, I had a great life. Yeah. Or when I was drinking 2 litres of vodka, things just couldn't get better.
And you don't see a way out of it.
No.
You know, and I thought about it quite regularly. You know, I always thought my lot in life was to die a heroin addict. You know, and I knew it was coming. My friends were dying. You know, like I said, I was a heroin addict for 20 years. You know, chucking the other drugs I was taking on top of that. You know, the crack, the dodgy tablets. I've had numerous overdoses. You know, the prison sentences. You know, just constant in and out of jail. Some sentences bigger than others. You know.
And if you over the course of 20 years, if you put all those prison sentences together, how many years would that look like?
I'd probably done 15 years off and on, in and out of jail. You know, I was back up in Northumberland last week, you know, and on the way up I went up with Connor. You know, I actually said I probably spent 5 years of my life in it, you know, over a couple of sentences. You know, same as home house. I go back in the home house now. Probably spent 10 years of my life in there, off and on, you know. You know. I
always tell people I used to live in Morpeth as well.
Yeah.
I was there for 5 years.
So, you know, looking back, you know, and I wouldn't want to go back to jail, you know, but jail saved my life quite a few times, you know, without a doubt.
Loads of people I've talked to would kind of use that's their detox time.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I know you can still get drugs in jail, you know, but like, they use that to get clean, come out, and then that cycle would start again. And then you're off and running again, aren't you?
And I would you know, and it's mental, because I used to say every time I went back to jail, I'd always say it's the last time, you know. You know, but it doesn't matter whether you've just done a couple of weeks or a couple of years. As soon as you hit them gates, you know, and I'd swear down, I'm never touching it again. I'm going on the straight and narrow. As soon as I hit the gates, I would start remembering dealers' numbers. They would just instantly, you know, that I'd never thought about for a couple of years. But as soon as you hit the gates, that's it. You just, you know, you're just straight back at it. You don't know nothing else. You know?
So that kind of, I mean, lost in all of that, in that darkness for all them years, and not seeing a way forward, and obviously multiple overdoses, multiple prison sentences. Then, I mean, you did show us the photograph, and you said you'd been on life support machine not so long before that. I mean, so was that another overdose as well?
It was. So that, you know, like I said, I've had numerous overdoses. You know, I probably had 5, 6, 7 overdoses, some worse than others. You know, and I don't talk, you know, I choose who I tell about me last overdose. You know,
well, you don't have to share it if you don't want
to. I don't mind sharing it. When I say I choose who I tell, I would never ever tell anyone in early recovery that my last overdose was the best thing that ever happened to me, you know. And it was strange how it came about. Just a couple of, you know, I was in early recovery. I'd gone into rehab. I'd actually been arrested. And I was in the police station at Peterlee, and this guy who was working for the police at the time, you know, I was in the cell, I was getting kept in overnight, I was going back to court in the morning, I was going back to jail, you know, it had been for something daft, you know, coming to the end of, you know, for the last couple of years of my addiction, my crime was more shoplifting and stuff like that. So I was in the cells at Peterlee, and this lad came down, he was working for the police, he was dressed just like I was, and he come in, he opened the cell door, he come in, And he started talking about him being in recovery. He used to be a heroin addict. He used to live on the street for 5 years. He was something like 5 year clean at the time. And I was like, you're full of shit. I do not believe a word you're saying. He's just trying to trap us into something. You know, but then he gives us a choice. He's like, you know, you're getting kept in tonight. You are going back to court in the morning. You know, you are going back to jail. Or I can get you into rehab. And I was like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. You know, I'm not going to jail. The drugs I was taking anyway just weren't doing nothing for us.
Yeah.
You know, I was just taking them to feel normal. You know, I wasn't getting a buzz off them anymore. You know, I wasn't enjoying it anymore. And I was like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. You know, I can go into rehab. I'm not going to jail. I'll do rehab. My crazy addict thinking was go into rehab, you know, go into there 3-4 weeks, get all my drugs out my system, you know, get off me methadone, and I can go out and use all over again.
You'll get a hit.
You know, it'll be like you know, I thought it was the best idea I'd ever had. You know, it'll be like the first time I ever used a drug, and it's what I did. You know, I went into rehab for 3 or 4 weeks. You know, came down off my methadone, which absolutely snapped me back. And I walked out. I actually told the staff I was going to the shop for a pouch of baccy and just didn't come back. But within half an hour, because it was the rad in seeing where I was, within half an hour I had a needle in my arm and I was popping dodgy tablets, and within 3 days I was on a life support machine. I'd OD'd. The only thing that saved us was, and I still don't know who the lad was, I was with somebody and he phoned an ambulance and left us. It's the only thing that saved us. But I ended up on a life support machine for 2 weeks. Rehab I was in, the rad, the staff were told I was not coming off this life support machine. My family were told I wasn't coming off it. You know, so I was supposed to be the rehab's first death. Thankfully came off it after 2 weeks, you know, and for me, the biggest thing for me was coming off my life support machine, and all my family were around my bed, my mum, my dad, my sisters, all crying eyes out, all crying, and the guilt just hit us, you know, and I just knew I couldn't keep doing what I was doing.
Well, you're surrounded by love as well, aren't you?
You know, and this is why I say, you know, my last relapse, when I OD'd, was the best thing that ever happened to us, you know. Don't get us wrong, I don't want to go and do it again and whatnot, you know. But my last relapse, you know, ended up on, you know, nearly dying. By far the best thing that ever happened to us, because it showed us I could not keep doing what I was doing. You know, I couldn't just go out and do it again. You know, so you know, for me, I'm not one of these people who can go out and use once. You know, you know. If I go out and use, that's it. I'm out on a 6-month bender, you know what I mean, and what I'll not come back from.
It's really powerful, like you should mention, coming around and, you know, all your loved ones around your bed in there, because I think a lot of the times you hear the term, you know, it's a ripple effect. What happens? It's not as a bomb blast, isn't it? It is literally like at a bomb, and the amount of people that get caught in that addictive bomb blast is crazy, isn't it?
You know, and they did, you know, and you know the amount of damage I did, you know, through my addiction to, you know, like I said, I had 3 young lads, you know, by the time I got clean, my kids didn't want nothing to do with us. They see us in the street and they just walk straight past us, you know, and I don't blame them, you know. I was never there for them, you know. I stole off my family, you know, the police turning up at the door, you know, saying your son's in hospital, you know, he's overdosed, you know, I've stole off me mum, my dad, you know, all of them, you know, the amount of damage I did to people, you know, and I always remember, and I can't remember who asked us now, but I remember somebody, it was a family member who said it to us, and they were like, why are you doing this? You know, why you know, I'm like, what you bothered about, you know? There's only me. It's me sticking needles in myself. It's not yous, you know. You know, and I didn't see the damage I'd done until I got, you know.
Well, I think 2 things: you can't see it, and you don't want to see it either, do you?
Exactly,
you know, again, like you said before, the addiction comes first.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've seen the picture of the recovery march, which is shocking, you know, and it's great to see you looking so healthy and so well right now. So you decide to make the change, and then what happens then? This transformative kind of journey that you're on. Yeah,
I was quite lucky, you know, just as I said, you know, this overdose was the best thing that ever happened. There was, you know, when you get kicked out of rehab, you know, you normally don't get a second chance until, you know, for the rehab I was in, which was a RAD, you're not, if you leave and use, you know, you're not allowed back in for 6 months or something like that, or until everyone who was in the rehab with you have all left. But because of what happened to us and how serious it was, they pretty much got us straight back in. But I've still had this addict thinking, you know, because I always remember in the hospital, you know, you know, just whatever drug I took, you know, which was heroin and tablets, you know, I'd already been in rehab 3 or 4 weeks anyway when I walked out, so I'd done my detox. I'd only been using for a couple of days, and I was already I'd been on a life support machine for 2 weeks, so whatever drug was in my system would have been out. But I always remember, you know, knowing that my time was up, but I still tried to blag the hospital to give us Subutex while I was in the hospital, and the point blank refused. So I blagged them into giving us methadone instead, which they were happy to give us, and they did. But I did, so I spent 2 weeks on the life support machine. I spent another 2 weeks in hospital, and I had this amazing worker who worked, called Stacey. She worked for the drug treatment centre at Peatley, where I used to get me methadone from for years. You know, absolutely lovely she was, you know, and she went all out to get me back into this rehab, you know. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have gotten back in there. I'd probably still back being out there in the madness. She pulled.
Probably not.
Oh, probably not. I'd probably be dead, you know. But she pulled all sorts of strings to get us back into there, you know. So within a week of leaving hospital, spending a month in hospital, and then within a week of leaving hospital, 2 weeks at the most, I got back into the rehab. And I didn't want to tell you the truth, I didn't want to go back in because everyone who was in the rehab with us when I walked out the first time was still in there. And I thought every one of them would judge the life out of us going back in there. And I always remember turning up, and you know, everyone was absolutely amazing, made us feel welcome, hugged us, stuff like that. You know. And the first time I was in rehab, like I said, I just didn't want to be there. You know, I did it for selfish reasons, but getting a second chance at it. And it was a 12-step rehab. Going back in and, you know, put my heart into it, knowing that I couldn't keep going the way I was going. And the big change this time was wanting to change, you know.
Yeah, and you get sick to death of people telling you, it starts with you, it's got to start with you. And, you know, when you don't want to hear that, you don't want to hear it. Couple of things that really stand out for me, and I'm glad that you've said them. I think it's important to mention the great professionals who's you know in the sector and in the game, and you know, in recovery, because I think quite often for professionals who haven't got that drug taking background and stuff, some of them get wrote off, you know, by people. What do you know about it and all this? But what I think it's really important. There's a lot of people in it who've got big hearts and who want to make a difference. And they haven't got the kind of dark past that you and I have. So it was great that you mentioned Stacey and all of that. And I know all about the model because I was there when it was written. And I don't want to drop it in, but I was Durham's first ever recovery champion.
Class.
So yeah, I always drop that in.
And you know, and I don't blame you.
But hearing about, because I left all that, you know, something mad happened and I was wrongfully arrested. But it's really, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I'll come to your cafe shortly as well. Hearing your story and stuff kind of reminds me why I stayed in, you know, I call it the people game and the recruiting and helping people and stuff. And hearing that, I think it's nice to, because it reminds you why you do what you do. You know, so thank you for that as well, and thank you for coming along. Second thing, then you go back in there and then you really want it. You know, you've got your family's love, and it's really important that you weren't judged and everyone gave you love. There's a big theme there, isn't there?
Well, there is, you know, and the rehab I was in, you know, I spoke about Stacey, the drug and alcohol work. You know, she wasn't in recovery herself. She'd never touched a drug in her life. You know, she went above and beyond because, you know, she loved the job and she wanted to help people. Whereas the rehab I went into, the RAD, all the staff are in recovery. You know, they've been there, they've done it. You know, and you respect them more when they've been there, they've done it. You know what I mean? You know. But yeah, you know, I wanted to change, you know, and within, you know, what, you know, once you go back in there, you know, as I said, my kids didn't want nothing to do with us and stuff, you know, they'd see us in the street, they'd walk past us, you know, within a couple of weeks of being in rehab, you know, my middle son was coming over to see us and stuff, you know, you know, my mum would come, my dad would come over and visit us, my mum, my sisters and stuff, you know, so all this good stuff starts happening. And you can see the change within a couple of weeks. You know, you start feeling better yourself. You know, so all this good stuff starts happening while you're in rehab. You know, and you know, and I always say myself, you know, and I hear it all the time. You know, you only get out of recovery what you put into it. You know, my coach in rehab, you know, I had 2 different coaches. You know, we spoke about Kenny earlier on, and Simon, you know, we're both absolutely amazing. And I spent 6 months in this rehab, you know, going, you know, don't get us wrong, it used to do me head in sometimes, you know. Many times I wanted to walk out, but I stuck at it. As I said, it was a 12-step meeting. I was going to 12, you know, going to NA meetings, AA, CA, anything to stay clean, you know. You know, and one of the craziest things for me, you know, and I don't know if, you know, Simon, my coach, just when I first went back into the rehab the second time, you know, all I did for the first couple of months, first 2 or 3 months was think about drugs, you know, but, you know, I was clean, but, you know, thinking about them all the time. I just couldn't get it out of my head. And then I was about 3-4 months into rehab, you know. And the crazy thing was, Simon, I was in a lecture one day and he was reading something out the big blue book, which is AA. And it was crazy because he read this passage out of the book and it went along the lines of all thoughts of using will disappear. You know, you don't know they've disappeared, they just have. And I was just like, wow, that's me. You know. So for the first 2 months of rehab, all I did was think about drugs. And then he read this passage out and I was like, wow, that's me. I'm 4 months clean, and I haven't thought about using drugs for 2 months, you know, and I didn't even know I'd stopped thinking about it. It just went, you know, and it's just things like that, you know, that reinforce, you know, that, you know, things do get easier, you know.
But you know, hearing you talk, and we're going to find out about where you're at now and what you're doing, because you both of you guys are making a tremendously big difference to other people's lives. So you could have said sorry and done nothing, or you could have said sorry and kept using, you know, or you could have said sorry and that would have been it, but you haven't, you know. And I'm really interested in where you are now and what you're doing now. And I know coming to getting re-inspired, this is really inspiring to me, hearing your story. But I know I came and met you, and so I'd like to hear from you what you're doing and how you got into this, and hear about that wonderful community cafe and all of the stuff that really inspired me when we met. So,
Yeah, no worries. Really just always wanted to help people. I mean, when we're in the cafe, you asked us a really good question, Gary, of what did you get into it for? And it made us think, and I was like, oh, I don't know. And then remembering kind of, since I was little, always wanting to help people, always kind of liking that idea, working in the prisons as a member of the DAR team, and hearing what Shawn said there about coming out the gate and remembering dealers' numbers. There was a lad who was a DART mentor for us. We're having quite a candid conversation.
Do you want to tell us and the viewers what DART is?
Yeah, so
you might think it's a DART team.
Yeah, it's not a DART's team. I'm no Phil Taylor. So it's the drug and alcohol rehabilitation team. And we have mentors on the wings. Well, I had mentors on the wings who helped the lads coming into the jail kind of understand that there is a path to recovery for them and kind of inspire them in that way. I was having a conversation, it was after a meeting we'd had, and one of the guys just went, I'm scared for when I get out. And I was like, why? He went, I know what life's like on here. He was like, I know I can come into here and feel safe. He went, but when I go out there, I'm left to my own devices and I know those dealers will still be there. And I was trying to help him with the recovery plan and stuff, and realising that there's people who need support on the outside led us to work for Recovery Connections. And I mean, the people in Sunderland are amazing, our community's massive. You've been to the CAF.
I have.
Staff in there who've been in recovery, been there, done that, got the t-shirts. When people come in crisis, it's not a, oh, okay, like, let's just like stay clear.
It's a strange thing to say, but I hope you'll agree. When I got out the card and we eventually found it, when I did see it, a little bit like what the Draw Centre was in Durham that Richard mentioned before. It's like a lighthouse, isn't it? Like a beacon of hope. And I think these places have got a different energy.
Absolutely.
You know, you can walk down the street, you can see what it is, and like it was like, it sounds crazy, it was like vibrating. And when I got in there, and you can see people coming in and out, the difference it makes them just coming in and having a coffee, and someone's there. And I think it's a really important part of things, isn't it? Knowing there's someone there. And if you're lost in the dark or in the woods, that bit of light's really important, isn't it?
No, absolutely. I think connection's massive. Like, even just speaking to someone where you've been in their shoes, and I mean, I always say to people who come into the groups, like, I'll never be able to be in your shoes, but I can kind of walk the path alongside you and like that recovery journey. And they come in here and we see them come into the cafe and various states and kind of crises, and we just sit them down, we talk to them, and it's kind of, that's the first place we meet them. It's a safe space, it's a good space. It's not somewhere where it's quite imposing or medical that can just go,
No.
This is where we are, this is who I am, and it's just being your authentic self, really.
Absolutely. Connection, I think, is everything, and being real as well. And I know we mentioned Matt Stevenson before, and that's one of the things I love about him and really respect him for. And he was there for me in a really dark part of my life, and I'll never forget that. And it is authentic, and it's real. You couldn't have said it better. So yeah. So then, where are we at now? Then what does it look like now? So we've gone through the darkness. We're out into the light. What's happening with you now?
Yeah. So, I love my life today. I
love your life today.
I love my life today.
Yeah.
When I first got into recovery and I left rehab, because you have them doubts, all I'd done since I was 13 was steal, use drugs, go to jail. I didn't know anything else. I'd never had a job. My addiction was my job, a 24/7 job. Criminal record probably as tall as Connor. Nothing to brag about, but 140 something convictions. Who's going to employ me? And I actually, when I was in rehab, I was starting to have these doubts. Thinking about this stuff. What now? I'm clean, I'm sober. What now? As I said, who's going to employ me? And I actually thought recovery was going to be a pile of shit. I really did. I started having these negative doubts, thoughts.
Well, it's fear, isn't it?
And that's exactly what it is, and I didn't know anyone, apart from the people I was in rehab with, who didn't use drugs or drink, and I actually thought, I'm going to leave rehab, and I'll just be sitting in the house, bored out my head, while all my friends are running around us using drugs and whatnot, but it's anything but that, So I left rehab and I got an amazing opportunity to start volunteering up at the Drug and Treatment Centre at Peterlee, where I used to get my methadone from. So going into the groups, talking to people and stuff, but I didn't enjoy it, because all my old friends are coming in, and I'd be talking to them, but they'd be coming in and offering us drugs for free. They didn't like us saying doing well. Never used to offer us drugs for free when I was using, but now I'm clean, I'll quite happily give them.
Well, there's a lot of people want to get you down in the hole that they're in, unfortunately.
And I was one of them people, at one point I'd have probably been the same. But I used to work with this amazing woman called Jenny, who works for Recovery Connections now. She was volunteering at the same place as me, and then she got a job down at Middlesbrough Recovery Connections / Hope North East at the time. And I'd seen her and I was telling her about what had been happening up at Peterlee, and I wasn't enjoying it or anything. And she offered us down to Hope North East to share my story at the rehab, when the rehab opened up, and I went down to share my story. And from there, the manager of the rehab asked us if I would like to start coming down volunteering and stuff, So, and I did that, and it was by far the best decision I've made definitely in recovery. So I started volunteering for Recovery Connections in the rehab and stuff. But for me, as I said, I'd never done anything with, apart from use, go to jail, steal, So I was only supposed to volunteer 3 days a week, you know, but, you know, what am I going to do with myself for the other 4 days? So I was literally down there 7 days a week, even on a weekend, coming down from Peterlee on the bus to Middlesbrough and back. Because I wanted to help people, you know. I enjoyed the volunteering, but it was about keeping me safe and giving me something to do.
I always say this, helping's healing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it's swapping one, at first, it's swapping one addiction for another. And
that's exactly what it was.
It's addictive, you're like, I'll have some of this. Yeah.
So it was, you know, it did sort of come an addiction, you know, but it was about, you know, I was helping people, but it was keeping me safe and all. And from there, doing the ambassadors course, which is, you know, the ambassadors course I did was the very first ambassadors course for Recovery Connections, which is, it's totally different to what it is now. Connor will tell you a bit more about it than what I can about the new ambassadors course. You know, but I did the ambassadors course, and from there, did that was a 3-month course, and from there, a job came up as a community coach in Middlesbrough. Not in a million years did I think. Everyone told us I was getting this job. You know, they're not supposed to tell us, but they told us, you know. But even so, people told us this job is yours. I just didn't think I would get it.
Well, that comes back to anxiety and fear as well.
And it does, you know.
Yeah, I can get with that as well. So you really want change. You'll do anything to kind of achieve it, but you're terrified in case it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And you know, you've let yourself down, and you've been let down as well in your life.
Yeah.
And it's unbelievable to think that someone's actually going to give you a chance for a new life. And you giving yourself a chance as well.
No, 100%. So yeah, put in for this interview and got the job, you know. And it was, you know, absolutely amazing, you know. 10 years later, I'm still with Recovery Connections, you know. I'm one of the longest members of staff for Recovery Connections. Done all sorts of different roles for them. From obviously my first role was a community coach. I've done night shift. I've been a rehab coach. But I'm definitely in found me calling, which is harm minimisation role, which I absolutely love. And
we hear that you're going to be running around Sunderland now, or driving around rather. Tell us a little bit about that then. Yeah,
so obviously from now, I did the harm min role in Stockton for quite a few years, for 3 years, but I'm up in Sunderland now. You know, I came up to Sunderland for a little bit more.
And the role, for those who don't understand, so harm minimalisation.
Harm minimisation, yes. So my role is, you know, the harm min role, you know, just Recovery Connections is all about recovery. We want to get people into recovery, and we all do. We get people into recovery and support them. But my role's slightly different. So yeah, it's about getting people into recovery, you know, but at the same time, it's about, you know, just we know people are going to be using. You know, my role's trying to keep them alive and as healthy as possible. You know, so that can be,
and educating them as well.
And education, and also, you know, so that can be anything from working in the needle exchange, you know, giving them clean equipment, giving them advice around safer injecting, all that stuff. Advice around drugs and all, you know, because we all know drugs are changing, especially with the new synthetic opioids. Naloxone's a massive one, which is our overdose reversal kit. Naloxone is my passion, you know. I absolutely love Naloxone. I've used it 40 times myself, so I have actually saved 40 people with it, you know. You know, it's not the brag, but I've probably used it more than
brag.
You know, well, I will brag.
Just get it out there.
I've probably used it more than anyone in the UK.
When you're talking about, you know, handing all that kit out, where can people get the education then? Is it from people like yourselves?
Yeah, so Naloxone's available at any kind of drug and alcohol service. It's totally free. You can just request to have a Naloxone kit and give you some advice around that, how to use it. I mean, Shawn goes around to different services and gives out Naloxone training. There's obviously advice like there is with tablets or anything like that, just in the kind of case. It tells you how to jab it. It's intramuscular, so there's no need for any kind of like trying to find a vein, tourniquets, anything like that. Stick it in and go. I mean, one of our ambassadors in Sunderland, kind of bringing it back to that, was in the big Tesco in Sunderland, the landmark of Sunderland, I think it can be classed as. And went into the ladies' toilets and found someone that had overdosed and had to use the Naloxone there. And obviously, if she was just left, it would kind of be ambulance called, kind of people just leaving her. but recognising the signs of an overdose, thanks to Shawn's training and kind of what we do on the ambassador course, to feel confident in using that kit and jab it and kind of go, okay, this is what I'm doing. Saving a life really, and kind of being there for it.
Amazing stuff. So one last thing from you then, this new ambassadors course and where you're heading with all this. I'm interested.
So
what's the next chapter?
Our ambassador course is amazing. It really, so for any of our people who are kind of 3 months drug and alcohol free, they can join our ambassador course. It's a whole program, it's 12 weeks, an accredited thing. It's a bit like the peer mentors, kind of get away from them. In that they understand kind of addiction, the models that we use, how to speak to people, how to kind of deal with certain issues that might crop up. And then they go out into the field, they work with Shawn, they work with myself, come into our events, tell their story as well. Some really inspiring stories in there. But the push at the minute is, I mean, Sunderland's got a really big recovery community. It's kind of in hiding at the minute, I'd say, in the community cafe and kind of in our recovery buildings. But it's building that up again and kind of letting people know in Sunderland to be like what's classed as an inclusive recovery city. So breaking that stigma down and kind of getting it forward. I mean, Shawn's out on his bike dishing out Naloxone and advice, and I've got a bike that dishes out free coffee if people want it. I think we'll be...
so we are going to be getting it, the Harman bike and all, which we, I didn't touch on a little bit, which is going to be absolutely amazing, just, it's not just about, getting to the people who are using, it's about getting to the wider community and all,
The message is everything, isn't it?
Absolutely.
If people don't know, they don't know. Exactly.
So we'll be able to, get out further afield with this Harman bike, which will be absolutely amazing when we get that.
So then, all right. So we are where we are then, I think. The big thing, I mean, hearing this again, coming back to that whole message of love and hope, being massive, isn't it? Huge. And I think for anyone who watches this and hears your story and hears what you're doing as well, it shows them that it can be done. You could be lost, you could have tried to turn it around multiple times, or you could feel all alone in the world and that there's no way forward. But I think you're living proof that there is, and that there is good people like yourself out there as well, making a huge difference. Look at all the lives you've saved. I mean, and the great work that you'll both continue to do. So just hearing it's mind blowing. It's blown me away today. So I just want to say a huge thank you to you both for coming along.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.